A week before Saigon fell, my father took my brother and me to a gate at the Tan Son Nhut airport, pointed to an American C-130 and told us to get on it. He handed us a small bag of clothing and some photos while he explained that we never see our family again. I was 12 and a half years old. We loaded up on the plane with hundreds of other people. Then I found a place to sit on the cold steel floor, not knowing where I was going. We went first to Subic Bay, then to Guam, then to Travis Air Force Base, Camp Pendleton, and finally to a refugee camp at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. 4 months later, by the grace of God, I was overjoyed to be reunited with my family in San Joaquin Valley, California. My American dream had begun. I was actually born in Dalat, which is about 200 miles northeast of Saigon, in 1962, which is approximately 3 years before the escalation of the war, 1965. My father was a veteran of the French War, World War II, back to the French War. In 1954, he took my mom and my oldest brother south to join up with the South Vietnamese army, and at that point he started his career fighting communism. We lived a pretty hard life. My entire family actually served in the military alongside with American soldiers. When you live in a military family, you have that understanding quickly. Because I remember I used to run around, 5, 6 years old, putting on my dad's cover and play soldier. But you understand real quickly because my mom and dad would never sugarcoat anything. So these are the bad guys. We're trying to defend South Vietnamese from being taken over by the North Vietnamese, which is the communists. So it was very clear to us from day one, whether you're 5, 6, or 7 years old, very clear that these are the enemies and we're the good people. And you can see it because we can walk freely. There are Americans on the street, there are foreigners, there are investors in the city of Saigon. And speaking of Saigon, I will never refer to it as Ho Chi Minh. This will be the last time I'll say that word, Ho Chi Minh City. Let me go back to an earlier conversation that I had with my dad. And I can talk politics with my dad at a very young age because he wanted me to be involved, and I really didn't want to be involved because I just want to play soccer and have a normal life. But the way he said it is this: communism exists under the following conditions, and you never want to be anywhere within their little diagram of how you should live. Number one, they have to be able to control the food source. So Dad made it very clear. You have to be somewhere between barely surviving and starvation. So that's control number one. You can't fight back if you're starving. Number two, you cannot have an education. And I remember I made up this word, it's called de-education. So they want to make sure that you don't get the news, you don't get the education. North Vietnamese children didn't go to school, and if they went to school, it was a political indoctrination of how bad the South Vietnamese are and how terrible that they would allow American forces to occupy South Vietnam. So instead of saying Americans were there to help the South Vietnamese, it would be an occupation. And lastly, you have to take away the weapons, the guns. So I'm just gonna say this to you. Why is it so important for me to defend the Second Amendment? It's because I lived in a place where there was no Second Amendment. So food source, education, and control of guns. Those are the three perfect conditions for communists to exist. So I understand that at a very young age. In a communist society, you really don't have the opportunities to become what you truly want. And I think it's devastating to the human psychology because you're taught at a very young age that we're gonna tell you what to do. There is no point wanting to be a scientist if we told you not to be a scientist. So it's very detrimental to young people growing up in a communist society because you just wake up and you just do exactly as you're told. So there is no professional opportunities. There's no way for you to want to learn more. Six days before the fall of Saigon, April 24th, my father picked me and an older brother up from his military jeep. Picked us up, drove us to the airfields, the military airfields. Go to the flight line. There's a C-130 there waiting for you to get on. So I got on the plane with a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and I thought, wow, you know, this cold steel floor that they have on a C-130 was really nice. Until the airman walked in, zipped himself up with gloves, and about 10,000 feet later, I assume about 10,000 feet later, that I needed that coat. So yeah, I've never experienced a plane ride before, and on a military plane, you just freeze. And I remember being super, super cold by the time it gets up in the air. The American military treated us very well. It's amazing. I can name all the points that I've been to, and we were fed, we were vaccinated, we were vetted, but there was always kindness there. So it came back to when people said, you know, America, occupy your country, how do you feel about it? I have to tell you, all I have experienced were just kindness. And so when I went to Camp Pendleton, I will tell you this story that I have told many, many times as I visit Vietnam veterans throughout the nation. That's one of my missions that I do. I remember being quite cold, same pair of shorts and the same t-shirt. And Camp Pendleton was basically a tent city. Not what they have now. And I remember being very cold. And a U.S. Marine, a young U.S. Marine, walked up to me, took off his field jacket, put it on me, and slapped me on the butt. And I had that field jacket until I was in high school. That was probably the sign of freedom, the sign of love, the sign of caring. They were all inside that green field jacket, and it says Marines on it, you know. I came back from college one day, and my dad thought that I wasn't gonna need it anymore, so he gave it to the neighbor. And I lost it. I came back. I remember watching the kid next door wearing that green jacket, and for a quick second, I want to walk over and say, "That's mine. That was my freedom." And I thought for a second, and I said, "Yeah, it looks pretty good on him. He has it." So go back to recent days. I was adopted by a group of Marines, and we play pool every Friday night. And I'll mention him, former Captain Dutch White, who spent 3 tours in Vietnam as a U.S. Marine. And we were discussing what it was like being at Camp Pendleton. Well, I was not a Marine, but my experience was a war refugee at Camp Pendleton. And I told him about the green jacket. So at the end of the night, I left the pool hall, which is his basement. I went up to my car, and there is a field jacket hanging off the side of the side mirror on my car. And it was white, the last name on it, U.S. Marines, and he still had the captain rank on it, and that was a gift to me. So, if you want to talk about kindness, you couldn't match that story of kindness, because here's my big brother, Captain Dutch White, heard the story and gave up his field jacket for me so that I can have that piece of love and freedom back. I live in a little town called Delhi. It's right off of Highway 99, right smack in the middle of San Joaquin Valley, which is an agricultural area. And so I went to Livingston High School, which was the home of Gallo wine, and the Merced River. And I got my first job as a sophomore, junior in high school with the Livingston Telephone Company. And it was an amazing time because I made so many friends, got so many opportunities to actually work as a young man and understand what it's like working as a young person in America, where you actually make money. I studied math and science. That's all I wanted to do. And so I went to Long Beach State, and I was an electrical engineering major. So I went through 3.5 years of engineering. Then I found out that I love to be on the creative side of life. And I love physics and chemistry and calculus, but I just didn't want to do the engineering thing for the rest of my life. So I changed my degree to art and education because I love to teach as well. That's what most people don't know, is I actually taught. So then Northrop Aircraft had an opening and had an interview, and they loved me because I understand the technical side of life as well as the creative side of life. And that's how I got my first job at Northrop Aircraft as a contractor. But I loved every day that I was there. I used to live across from a Buddhist temple, and unfortunately, that's where all the coffins come back of young men and women that's just coming back every single day. So every single day, I experience parents mourning their children. That was a daily thing for me. It's a reminder later on in life that life is so precious. You don't know if you have tomorrow or not. And so that was my experience in Vietnam as a child, just watching these coffins coming home every day. So unlike a lot of people, when they arrive in the United States, they can actually compare to what life was like then. I actually thrive on the fact that I no longer have to think about the next invasion. So maybe I see life a little bit different. Now, living in a constitutional republic, which actually was designed to protect democracy, it is an amazing system. It is an amazing system. Now, as a young man, I went to college. I didn't think of it. But what got me really involved with how life is in the United States is when I actually stood across the gas pump from a Vietnam veteran and watching him fill up his tank. Me walking across the island to put my hand out to shake his hand, I was a junior in college with a nice motorcycle, and I shook his hand, and that was the first time a Vietnamese immigrant had shaken his hand, and he was in tears. If you want to go back to why I visit Vietnam veterans throughout the nation to thank them, that gentleman made it happen. So living in freedom and democracy, you wake up in the morning, you have food, you have a job to go to, but that Vietnam veteran reminded me that there is more to life than what you're experiencing today. It's all the people that went before you to defend you. These great men that actually created freedom for the rest of us. And that was my realization of why it was so important for me to be an American. So for the high school kids out there that are wondering, what is this all about? All you have to do is look up the history of communism. Remember, 100 million people were killed in slightly over 100 years of that concept. And it hasn't ended. It continues today in communist China, in communist Vietnam, in a lot of miserable places. Well, continue to read that little book. That little book is called the U.S. Constitution. Continue to take advantage of the opportunities given to you by this great country called the United States of America. I would never ever change my life at all because of the personal experience that I had, because that is what makes me today, how much I appreciate freedom. You can just remember what our founding fathers had gone through to make this great nation. It's really easy to be a communist when you wake up in the morning, you're full, you got your coffee, and you got your iPhone. It's really easy to promote communism when you're full. It would be very difficult and hard if you have to live life under communism, so remember that.